going on, guys? It's your boy. Welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be doing a full-length movie review of the movie Weapons, currently out in theaters, directed by Zach Cregger. Let's talk about it.
Modern Movie Review.
Okay, so I think I can actually probably do the majority of this review without doing any spoilers, so I'm not even going to bother issuing a spoiler warning. I'm going to try to stay away from them as much as possible. I will say something that I do find really funny about this movie, a lot of the discourse on the internet has been like talking about just random individual scenes that happen throughout this movie, and this movie has a lot of different moments from different characters' perspectives that low-key don't feel like they go with the plot, and because of that, I've seen a lot of people talking about, like, I've read so many spoilers online, and I've seen so much about this movie, and I still have no idea what the fuck goes on in this movie, and I kind of love that. I do think that that is actually one of the plus sides to this film. The way that this movie is laid out is so interesting, and it's in such a fun way that I personally really enjoy it, where instead of it being linear and it just being like, okay, well, the children go missing, here's everything that plays out from there, it's, okay, well, this is this person's point of view. And something else that I thought was interesting was the movie takes place, or starts taking place, about a month after whenever the school's trying to reopen after the kids have been missing for over a month. And I think that that was a really interesting decision. I will say that that kind of helped me a lot with the pacing, because there's a lot of moments in this movie where things kind of feel like they're meandering, and I would typically have a problem with that, but in this movie, since it's been over a month, it's kind of like it makes sense that certain people are meandering, because after somebody goes missing for, you know, over 48 hours, it's presumed that they're dead. So it kind of makes it make a little bit more sense why certain people don't care as much as you think they should. But that being said, I like the way that this movie starts off with the character who's going to care the most about these children, and then kind of progresses into, here's the person who cares the most, here's the person who cares also a lot, here's somebody who doesn't care as much, then somebody who really doesn't give a shit at all, to here's this random other person's perspective, and then here's like the perspective that's kind of make it so that the entire mystery of what the hell is going on, it gets revealed. And I thought that that was really cool. I like the way that they really slowly unbuild this mystery, and I think that they do a really great job of just kind of like introducing us to the characters in a way that's very palatable, because this movie does kind of have a lot of characters. I think that there's like 7 kind of like main characters almost, and I do think that separating them so that we see things from their perspective really helps us understand what their intentions are, what everything they do in the movie is for. And I really liked it, because when I saw this movie, there was a short period of time where I want to say it's like about like halfway through the movie that you're like, wow, they really don't seem to like care about the kids in this movie, and like they don't seem to like have any sense of urgency about, oh my god, where are the kids at? And at first I was like, that's a really big flaw. This movie seems to be dragging its feet. It doesn't even seem to know what the plot of this own movie is, until I discovered that's kind of the point. Everything about this movie is written incredibly well, incredibly detailed, and it's very precise. Every single scene, every single interaction that people have with each other feels very intentional, and I love it because, like I said, they start off with the people who are going to care the most about these children and have a lot of emotional stakes in here, to people who don't care as much. And because of that, about like halfway through, you kind of like stop worrying about the kids so much, because there's kind of like a more comedic thing that's going on and a little bit more interesting thing. And then the person who finds the kids in this movie, not to spoil it, but the kids do get found, they are alive, they are safe, but the person who finds them kind of like accidentally stumbles upon them, and it's in a very like funny and entertaining way, considering the first 2 people have been trying to do everything they can to find the children and have been like kind of trying to like solve this mystery, and then for the person to find the kids, like to just accidentally kind of stumble across them, was kind of funny. And I really liked that. I think that this movie did a great job of kind of showcasing everybody's motivations, their intentions, and it's really interesting. This is a great character driven movie, and I think for the most part Zach Cregger brings a lot of really fun energy to this, because one thing that I love about Zach Cregger, right, the guy who wrote and directed this movie, he used to do sketch comedy, right? And for people who do not know, that's like a really big start for a lot of people in Hollywood. Like a lot of actors, a lot of directors, a lot of them start off doing kind of sketch comedy teams, improv teams, stuff like that, until eventually they get their first relatively serious role. And I like the fact that he went from that sketch comedy group to directing horror movies like Barbarian, and it's really good. I am a really big fan of his style, his flair, and because he was so good with comedy, you can see that he has this energy where, yeah, some of the things that we're seeing are horrifying, and yes, there's some like really gruesome sequences, and there are some very gory sequences in this movie that are like pretty rough to look at. And I think that being able to have all that gore, the really like uncomfortable sequences, a couple of jump scares that worked really well on me actually, and then go from that to, like I said, the 2 characters who don't seem to care as much about the children having their kind of like funny alteration is kind of funny. And I think that they balance the comedy and horror really well. And something that I also really like about this movie, some of the jump scares that are like really scary are almost immediately followed up by something that's kind of hilarious. Like there's a character who has a dream sequence, and in the dream sequence he's having like a very emotional conversation with his son because it's like one of the parents of the kids who went missing, and like he can tell it's a dream, but he's like telling his son things that he wish he could tell him face to face, and he's like, you know, about to like cry and just like give him this like huge emotional thing about like, I'm going to find you, don't worry buddy. And then a jump scare happens, and I literally screamed in the theater, holy shit. I jumped up. I got terrified. And then the character in the scene wakes up from his dream and just yells, "What the fuck?" And it's so funny. It's really good. And there's just a lot of moments like that that I really do appreciate about this movie. Another thing that I do think is kind of interesting, Zach Cregger already has a very distinct style. Like, I feel like every once in a while we'll talk about, I believe it's Quentin Tarantino, and how like he has his like trunk shots that are like his iconic thing. He opens up a trunk and then they have the two people standing outside of it having a conversation. I feel like Zach Cregger is already starting to have one of those for himself. And it's a scene where a character is seemingly going into some place and is getting chased from really far away, and you can see in the background like 30 seconds before the person actually gets caught up with that somebody is chasing them. And in both instances that I'm thinking of with Zach Cregger doing it, in Barbarian it's like, okay, well there's a man who's sprinting towards her in the middle of the street, and that's kind of terrifying, but she ends up going into the house, and then later we find out that that guy was actually trying to save her and protect her, and he's not actually a threat. In this movie, they do something similar where the girl is going into a liquor store, Julia Gardner's character, and you see somebody chasing her, and then like she beelines to the vodka section because she's about to go buy a bunch of vodka because she's an alcoholic. Relatable content. But she beelines to the vodka section, and then like while she's walking there's somebody chasing right behind her and chasing right behind her, and she's right behind her, and it's kind of like a terrifying thing because like, oh my god, what's gonna happen? And then the reveal of who it is kind of hilarious, and their little altercation that they have, once again, just absolutely hilarious. And I think that this movie does a really good job of being really hilarious but also having you like on the edge of your seat, because like that's a very tense moment, and if that wasn't a comedic bit that could have been really, really scary. And I love that. I think that that's awesome. But that being said, that's kind of everything I want to talk about that is spoiler free, to kind of get into the actual like meat of the story and talk about how interesting and fascinating this story actually is. I am gonna have to talk spoilers, so I'm gonna go ahead and issue a spoiler warning here. And let's just say the way that this movie was written is incredible. I've seen some people say this is probably like the best script that's came out in the last couple of years. I would probably be inclined to agree. I really want to know how the hell Zach Cregger was able to come up with some of this stuff, because like, it's so interesting. I'm wondering, like, did he have the ending mapped out already? Did he start off with the characters, like, who we see at the beginning of the movie, or did he work his way backwards? It's a very interesting thing. So the mystery, obviously, what happens with those 17 kids is there's a witch in town. She's visiting her nephew, and she kind of kidnaps the nephew's parents, kind of, like, is draining their life force and kind of, like, manipulating them to do everything that she needs them to do. And she needs young people so that she can kind of like harvest their energy, something like that. That's basically the vibes that you get from this. And so she convinces her kid, Alex Lilly, to take something that belongs to every single one of his classmates so that she can summon them. And she summons them at 2:17 in the morning. That's why they all run off into the middle of the road and go to wherever they need to go. And whenever that happens, Alex Lilly now needs to kind of have like put up a front and act like everything is fine and cool, when in reality, the 17 kids from his class that went missing are in his basement, and he's having to feed them soup to keep them alive. And oh my god, that is very dark. That is crazy. That is very tough to watch. And like, I couldn't imagine that kid. Like, that is actually a genuinely horrifying thing to think about, is the fact that that kid had to feed 19 people, because there's two parents and the 17 kids, soup every single day for, you know, over a month. Like, that's wild. That is crazy to think about. And just like being trapped in that house, that is very terrifying and very scary, and he couldn't talk to anybody or do anything to kind of like help his situation. Very interesting, very unique, very eerie. Love that. I think that Zach Cregger did a great job with that. And I also like the way that he fleshes out like the witchcraft side of this is also really, really great. So to compare this to Sinners, I know some people are making the comparisons just because they're original horror movies that are doing really good at the box office this year, but to compare it to Sinners, Ryan Coogler kind of famously said that he didn't care a lot about the vampire lore. Like, he didn't want to do a whole lot of fleshing out of the lore for vampires. It just kind of seemed like he had an idea for a movie, and the studios were like, this needs something more to sell this movie. And he's like, throw vampires in there, do something supernatural, it'd be really cool. And then he just kind of had to go with it because you can tell in the movie, like, there's one character who kind of has a general gist of what vampires are, but there's no, like, great explanations for any of the kind of, like, supernatural things that happen in this movie. Whereas in this, you can tell Zach Cregger had a great idea for, okay, she's going to have this tree, she's going to have these branches, she's going to know how to do spells and use potions and stuff like that. And it's such an interesting concept. And the way that the magic is portrayed in this movie is really interesting. The fact that these people are transformed into weapons is really interesting, and that's something I love. Anytime a movie has a name that, like, going into it, you're like, why is that even the name of this movie? And then it gets revealed in a really cool way. I thought that that was awesome. And I just love the fact that they can kind of become like heat-sinking missiles. Like, that is such a terrifying concept, and the way they use it in the movie is insanely cool. Like, it is awesome. So overall, I really like this movie. I had a really good time with it. I do wish that Zach Cregger would consider maybe doing some action movies in the future, because the final chase sequence with there being a little girl chasing down the old witch, and she's like chasing her down like a fucking heat-sinking missile, and it's just like an insanely cool POV shot. Like, Zach Cregger, his cinematography is just phenomenal, and the way that he like knows where to put the camera, how to have the camera following the characters. Some of his scenes feel like a video game in like the coolest way possible. So overall, I really like this movie. I think it's one of the best movies that's came out this year. I think I have it ranked number 4 out of all the movies that have come out this year. I've only seen about like 47. I'm kind of slacking this year, but I still think it's really good. Definitely would recommend checking it out. If I had to give this movie a rating on a scale of 1 to 100, I give this movie a solid 93. I think that it is insanely good, and I think that it's something that would probably even get better with rewatches. I know a lot of times when it's movies like this where there's like a mystery being unraveled, it kind of like, when you rewatch it, you lose some of that shock factor. I think that this movie has the added benefit of, because there's a lot of interesting things to learn about each individual character, rewatching it with that extra context in mind does make it a little bit more interesting. So overall, I really like this movie. 10 out of 10 would recommend. I definitely think if you live somewhere where you could go see it in IMAX, go check it out in IMAX. I'm sure that's probably great. But yeah, that being said, that's it for this video, guys. Thank you guys so much for coming by and checking it out. I love and appreciate you guys so much for watching. And if you liked it, feel free to like and subscribe, and I'll hopefully see you guys in the next one. Peace out. Bow. Bow. Bow.